Hi everybody, it's so good to be here. As mentioned, it's taken me 3 years to get here, so I'm really excited. I was excited enough before, and then I found out that there's a national holiday in Georgia on May 26th, which is my birthday. So maybe I'll be back here once a year. Well, not today, but on Georgia Day. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. But thank you, everybody. My name's Neil Richards. I'm here to talk about how curiosity will help your creativity. And it's all kind of around, I'm a bit sort of nervous and British and not very good at wanting to mention the fact that it's about my book, which is also coming out. But I've gone full brand, I've got the t-shirt on, and I sort of can't deny it now. So I have a book that sort of accompanies all the kind of things that I'm talking about, and I'd love to talk to anyone about it or sign it if anyone is interested. But enough about that, we'll go on to the talk. So, Questions in Dataviz, it's all about the journey that I've taken through data visualization. It's to try and encourage you to do the same thing. So someone who might be not so much a beginner, but someone who knows the basics, someone who has worked on a BI tool, knows how to do a good basic chart, that kind of thing, but always wanted to know, how can I do more creative stuff? How can I do more fun stuff, like the things that I've seen in some of the books that I love to read, or like some of my inspirational people that I've seen on Twitter and on the internet, that kind of thing. So it came out of a blog where every blog post I did for every piece of work or everything I thought about, I think there's a question. And some of these are first questions. They're questions around what you might think are sort of fairly standard best practices, but just going a little bit deeper into them. Some of them then are more challenging questions, and they're not really challenging, but they might be questions you've never thought of before, things that are slightly more unusual than the first questions. And then I move on to idea questions, which are mainly more sort of themes around some new ideas I've come up for data visualizations, which are sort of followed on from there. So for this talk, I want to just sort of give you a flavor, and we'll talk about one of each of those. So first questions I've called, what's in a color? So I want to talk all about color today. I want to say some good practices here, and I hope probably most of you are sort of quite aware of these. Use color sparingly, keep the saturation low. Color's great for highlighting, but you don't want to use it everywhere. Keep color palettes to 5 colors maybe. 7, I think, is what Aisha and Amanda said in the talk just now, their workshop for Continentalists. Absolutely right. And consider accessibility. The famous one for that is, avoid red, green if you can. Think about color blindness. So there's some great, good practices to learn. But there's so much more to think about. This tells the story of when I was a young manager and I had to hand out desk diaries. And probably, giving my age away, they certainly didn't have 2023 at the beginning. They probably didn't even begin with a 2. It was back before we did everything online. And all the people in my team, I wanted them to know their deadlines and things, so they would just have a desk diary like this. I had about 8 people in the team, had a bunch of different colors, handed them round. And there was one guy I left till last. He was a great guy, but he was probably the most, he had pretty strong feelings about stuff, and he was quite imposing. He was 2 meters tall, so I was a bit sort of chickened out, so I went to him last. And I gave him a last red diary. And he looked at me, and he didn't look up at me, he looked down at me, and he said, no. Just one word, and I was terrified. I walked back to my desk. I thought, what have I done to offend him? And this is why you don't give a red diary or a red anything to this guy. There are 2 teams in Liverpool, in England. One is called Liverpool. They're very good, very successful. They wear red. His favorite team was the other team. They wear blue. He didn't want any reminder of the other team. He never wore anything red. He didn't have a red pen. He would refuse to write in red. And I'd never noticed that. But it was such a deep-lying cultural association to him in that one particular city of the UK that no way was he going to take even a red desk diary off me. So that was a lesson learned about him that day, but that was one of the first lessons I learned about associations of color and other things that you just might not know until you come across them. So there's lots of color associations. I started to look at orange and blue. Orange and blue gets used quite a lot because they're nice and complementary colors. You might think of them hot and cold. That's what you see on the taps. Is that good, bad? Yeah, probably. Orange for good. You prefer to be warm than cold. And then you've got the red, amber, green that a lot of people use, sort of stop, wait, go, like traffic lights. You think, well, green is good, red not so good. We've got orange in the middle there. So it's already starting to get a bit confusing then. And with orange being sort of closer to red, are we, for orange blue, should we have it the other way around? It can start to be tricky once you sort of muddle some of these associations together. And another thing to show you from, wait a moment. Now, this hasn't animated the way I wanted to, but that's okay. I can show you it on screen here. On the left, Iraq's bloody toll. Every color evokes an emotion. I'm so sorry, that's two things I've taken from the talk today, the brilliant workshop from Continentalist. And you'll see the red looks like blood there. It looks a kind of violent color. It was chosen, this by the South China Morning Post. And it's a really good metaphor pointing out, kind of trickling down like that, what a violent conflict it had been. Now look at this on the right. This was created by Andy Cockgreave from Tableau. And it's exactly the same. All they've done is turned it round and used a much cooler, nicer, more pleasant blue. There's a more pleasant font as well. And that's really the only other sort of design choice other than to pick a different headline. And straight away, you've got a completely different visceral reaction to that. And here we go. There's a Chinese lady looking at the stock market. Now, most of us, or I certainly in the Western world, look at that and think, oh, wow, she should be really happy. Look at all these green numbers. All the stocks going up, only a few red. And that's what I would think. But of course, in China, look at all these green numbers. These green numbers have got minus numbers. The green ones are the stocks that have gone down. The red ones, red being a lucky number, a great color in China, those are the ones that have gone up. So this association is not just different, it's completely flipped around. It's the opposite, depending on which of these two cultures you think of. And again, kind of the orange ones in the middle. So this, you can't see the white on this too much, the kind of wording behind it, but what you can see from this, every particular spoke around the wheel is a different association, a different emotion. So you've got everything from anger to courage to freedom to good luck, etc., etc. And then as you go in, each of these colors represents a different culture. And you don't have to look at that too much. This is from Information is Beautiful on the front of the book to realize, wow, pretty much everything has different colors depending on where you are. Just sort of, this red and green one here, for example, that represents good luck, and it shows how many cultures use green and how many cultures use red. So it's a bit of a minefield. And then what about gender? What about male and female? You might think blue for boys, pink for girls. It's a really sort of fixed gender association. And if I wanted to do that on one of my charts, I'd probably think, I don't need to put a legend. People will probably get what I mean. But it's a bit cliche. I'm not sure I like going into toy shops and seeing all the blue stuff for boys and pink stuff for girls. I like to think different from that. So Lisa Charlotte Muth is an amazing blogger, data rapper. She looked a few years ago at all recent articles to see which publications are using red and pink or something similar to it, and which are using something different. And it was about half and half. So people really are doing different things. I personally love green and purple, which a couple are using. It has associations with the suffragette movement in the UK, which fought for women's rights. So I think there was a nod to that particular choice. So it really is up to you, which one do you use? And when I gave this talk a couple of weeks ago, a lady came up to me, she was quite disappointed and said, well, Neil, I don't mind being pink. I don't mind having pink and blue. It doesn't upset me. Does this mean I have to change all my charts now? Of course it doesn't. It's just something to think about. What's your preferences? What might associations be? And what are you most comfortable with doing? However, sometimes this is where I broke all the rules. There was no way that I could do. I wanted to visualize, I think it's 19 different songs by my favorite group at the time. And I wanted to visualize it in lots of different ways. And I decided I needed one color per song. There was no way I could do that and keep it tasteful. There was no way I could do that and keep it in 7 colors. So I just had to go bold and bright and break the rules. And to be honest, people didn't mind. People who don't know that was the kind of Dataviz rules, they were happy to see it colourful, to have a bit of fun visualization. So sometimes you just got to break the rules. Consider them and then think, is this something I need to follow or not? Similarly, if your colours have associations which you just absolutely can't break, this very simple. I just wanted to show the colours of all the different underground lines in the underground in London at every particular station. I can't change the colours. They all have lines associated with them. That makes it easy. Just go for that. So, this is my next chapter, but before I go on, I probably didn't actually answer any of those questions. So my book is all about sort of asking questions and then thinking, well, I know more than I did before. I've got more to think about than I did before. What direction shall I take? What answer shall I have? So there's very few answers in data visualization, except it depends. My next chapter, I want to talk about why visualize using triangles. And this came about because earlier in the year or last year, just a couple of really interesting visualizations started to come out. A lot has been mentioned about things like circles, but not so much about triangles. And if you want to look at triangles, well, where do we even start? If you want to encode area, these probably all have different areas. Are we looking at height? Are we looking at length of a particular of one of the particular sides? If you really want to be accurate and encode information, maybe triangles are going to be tricky. And if we look at this, or this is looking at area versus length, albeit of circles, this was a survey done which had over 4,000 responses by Steve Wexler, who's the author of 2 amazing data visualization books, really to show that if we're looking at length, and you can see here, over 70% of people were able to guess what the length of that bar was, but only 39% of people could accurately get the area. So areas are tricky. As soon as we go into two-dimensional things like circles or triangles, it can be tricky. This next one, I love this next one though, and this is one of the visualizations that sort of sparked that discussion and sparked my idea to look more into triangles. And if you look here, these are pretty difficult to determine, all right, how much of this triangle have I got shaded in here? But it doesn't matter because they're annotated. So you can actually start, the chart does that work for you. And what it is, it's a great metaphor of looking at how empty the reservoirs were starting to become in California. This is from the Washington Post. And if you look at it, it looks like a cross-section, doesn't it, of a valley or a reservoir, something like that. So I think it was a great choice. And the difficulty of being able to look, you can still look at it and think, blimey, these reservoirs are starting to run low. And for the actual encoding, you can find that information where they've marked them up. So often it's really good advice if you know you want to show actual values and you want people to be able to encode areas of things, bear in mind that it's difficult, and if you can annotate it, then you've got past that particular issue. This, much more different, this was from Christina Sush. She created a whole load of visualizations, just data art really, fun visualizations, looking at how scores in sports matches were encoded. This, I think, was the European Cup earlier, the UEFA Cup. And every time somebody scored, it would go up, and then every time the opponent scored, it would go up. And so each goal or each point created a triangle. It's a great thing to look at. It's really striking. I love it. It's colorful. It's geometric. Why do you visualize using triangles in this? I don't know. Maybe the answer is it looks cool. That's a good enough answer for me. If you can come up with something that's innovative and striking, that's always a really good pro. And I actually, I have one animated chart here. This might not load up. Well, you can see here in the one that's not animated there. I took this and I borrowed it. I said, hey, Christina, I like this so much. Can I please recreate this? And I did so for curling. And there's all sorts of sports that you can do it for where it looks quite eye-catching. And we've got some more examples here, similar to the triangles, all nicely sort of annotated. And if it's difficult to kind of interpret what the values might be in an individual, once you compare them across countries, when you have a grid or small multiples like that, That's when you can, in a graphically pleasing and interesting way, you can see the difference between one country and another. One on the left, information all about CO2, it was in Scientific American. I contacted her again and borrowed it and did something very similar for contraception choices for women. Again, when I had a number of different visuals I wanted to display in an unusual way, but to still compare across all of those different countries. Okay, now sometimes when we talk about triangles, we're talking about the structure rather than the actual mark at all. So this one, here's an example of something where you only need to fill in half the information. Now, it's a simple mileage chart from city A to city B. There's no need whatsoever to have the top right there, because the mileage from city B to city A is exactly the same as the mileage from city A to city B. So the real estate of certain charts just has to be triangle. So here's another example. I wanted to look at how prices changed between buying them and selling them in the UK. Now, the year of buying is always going to be before the year of selling. So there's never going to be anything in the top right information there, because you're never going to have a house sold before it's bought. And that allowed me, I didn't want to leave loads of big white space, but that allowed me plenty of room for annotations, explanations, legends, titles, all that kind of thing. And sometimes, these triangle charts, I was contacted after I started doing the research for this by Zan Armstrong, who's a data visualization person who works with scientists, and said, actually, our industry loves this. Metal science, if you want to look at the composition of 3 different things, tin, tantalum, cobalt, and if you want to display whatever that is scientific, which I don't understand, my audience, they love these. They said, we really get them. You can use different colors, and it's such a great way of comparing 3 different values. And that might be tricky for the general public, but very often there's specific things which specific audiences will have a lot more familiarity to if it's part of their daily job. More triangles, about 3,000 to be precise. I wanted to visualize the Data Visualization Society, the first 3,000 or so people signing up, and the information I had was where they came from in the world, and then 3 metrics scored on data visualization and society. So I first thought, well, let's do some kind of spider chart, like a radar chart, but there's a bizarre analogy coming up, but if you have a spider with 3 legs, it's basically a triangle, and that's what each of them were. And when I decided I wanted to show every individual member, I showed them as a triangle. It started to look like a forest. Once I encoded it, it looked like a sort of close together forest. I made them bigger. I broke some more rules because I decided I don't mind that all these points overlap. I'm not going so much for analytical value here, although everything here is an accurately coded data point. I'm starting to see a metaphor coming together. I'm starting to see a community, a close-knit community of trees in the forest, if you like, and I really like the way that it came out. So you can dig into it to find the actual values and see which of all of these people represent, but the overall triangle metaphor just gave a really nice shape of looking like close-together trees. So again, that's the end of my triangle point. It was so much fun just to realize actually how often triangles can be used in data visualization. And just because it's not something that you ever see in books, it doesn't mean that you can't sort of do interesting stuff like that. Now, my next chapter, why visualize using flowers? I didn't realize quite how much I like to use flowers as visualization, so it was pointed out to me, but there are some great reasons for visualizing look like flowers. I'm going to sort of rewind a little bit here. This is something I love to talk about when I talk about Tableau. Now, Tableau is my data visualization tool of choice, but it doesn't really matter for everything I've put. But this piece of art by Pete Mondrian, it looks like a tree map, doesn't it? You can see something like that and think, I think I could probably do that in my BI tools software. And he actually called it Tableau number 1. So that was kind of a coincidental light bulb moment to me, to make me think, well, I wonder if my BI software could start to do sort of art kind of stuff. So Tableau itself, it means a striking scene, a picturesque grouping of persons or objects. And if you look at it in French, it means a board. So we're talking about the blank canvas that you can create this striking scene on. So it's all about telling a story, if you like. Data visualization is about telling a story using pictures. So this is a visualization that inspired me. It's by Yvette Kovacs and Istvan Koromboy, some visualizers in Hungary. And they wanted to look at the gender disparity in 100 different companies. And they used it. They chose to pick the different metrics that were in the data and show them in ellipses that looked like petals. And it gave a really striking appearance whilst accurately encoding all that data. And I love the way that you could do that in something that makes you look when it's sort of on a poster in a gallery, because it has a really sort of pleasing flower look to it. So this is one of mine, which I did for Operation Fistula, which is a charity which it looks to improve the life of women throughout Africa by providing a really sort of important operation for them. And I chose to have the flower motif here as well. I think below the line, I had each of the women's ages, and above the line, we were looking at the potential number of years that the operation was giving them back. And because they were all sort of moving left to right like that, I just felt it gave a really nice sort of organic feeling of hope there. So I was really happy with that flower metaphor. And what I like about flowers is flowers are a bit like scatter plots, which might sound a bizarre thing to say. Scatter plots, you can encode with X and Y direction, you can have the different size of the middle element, you can have colors, and you can have different shapes. So scatter plots already are really good for encoding information. But once you think about flowers, if that's what you want to do, you can start to look at the petals, you can look at their shape, you can look at their positioning, you can look at where they're rotated around the middle. So you're starting to double all the amount of encoding that you can do. And I went further than that. I decided to put data in the stalks as well. So this was actually looking at the composition of teams, of squads in the Premier League. Not an obvious metaphor with flowers, I'll give you that. And I decided to put their position in the league across, the running total in the stalks as well there. Now, these are not analytic, they're geometrical vises. I mean, this is another kind of example where really I want the shapes to be sort of appreciated aesthetically, to look striking, to know that there's data behind them. And if you're interested, the reader can do the work and you can find out what each of them means. And like I say, they're not for clients or board meetings, that kind of thing. And what I was really pleased with, when I first did this flower visualization, put it in PowerPoint, ready to do a presentation. Of course, it will prompt you to put alt text in for an image, which is always good to describe images for those with sight impairments. Okay. And once I pasted that in, it called it a group of colourful flowers. Okay, so and I thought, yes, because I know it's not a group of colourful flowers. I know I've visualized this with circles, ellipses, and wiggly lines. But I fooled PowerPoint into thinking that this is a bunch of flowers. So it really sort of gives me validation that what I'm having fun doing, using just geometry and shapes and my BI tool, is actually creating something that looks like flowers. Now, I'm going to go through this last bit really quickly. I put in some sort of trigonometry which can be used by people who are in Tableau just to basically show that once you've decided you know what you want to draw, then there's always a way of using the math behind it in order to explain where do I want my software to put it. So you need to go back to your schoolboy maths, which in my case, which is a long time ago, but thankfully I still quite enjoy it. So when you're plotting things around a circle, don't forget it's a sine and cos. This is just to say that I pull in a whole load of data, because if I want to draw a circle, I need something like 40 data points, and I need them all to be joined up in a straight line. My software tool can't draw a circle. All it can do is draw dots and then join them up. But once you can do that, if you can pull in something like that, that's the way in. That's just the same thing. For petal, I mean, these are all really just ways of saying that things are easier than they look. I don't know how to do an ellipse, but I know how to do a circle and squash it. And that's what I'm saying people just need to do if you want to draw a petal shape.
No.
This is saying how to draw all the petals in and just rotate them around your circle. And this is really just saying, I can remember now, how do I get them all to be rotated nicely around the circle? But I went straight to Google. And any math formula you want, any trick that you want, anything like that, where you're trying to think, well, I'm sort of halfway there, but I wonder, has anyone done this before? You know, there's no shame in doing that. And just remembering, or even if you didn't know, that tells you how to rotate things round a certain angle. So once I'd done that, I put in a little bit of code. That gave me my final visualization, which I just needed to make sure I scaled correctly. So the whole time, all I was doing was I was doing a little bit of, it was like being back at school and doing geometry. I was putting everything in X and Y where I wanted it. And that's my summary, really. My summary is question. Just ask questions. Question your basic principles first. Always know what your basic principles are, for example, with color, and then think, do I want to go down the road of breaking them here? Do I want to really rethink, what's the standard thing? Or do I need to remember exactly what to use? Things you might not have thought before. Well, my example here was triangles. You might not have even thought of using triangles before. It doesn't matter if you think of something different. Maybe overlapping all the different shapes there. That's another thing I talk about. And then think of a brand new idea. If you've come up with something, if you've been inspired by someone, and you think, I could do something really similar to that. I can just ask a few more questions. I can consider, will there be an audience of people who'd be interested in that? Then just go for it. And I mentioned Tableau, but only because Tableau is my visualization tool of choice. But your tool is a blank canvas. And I changed it so it's a blank canvas of graph paper, because you can draw what you want, you can create what you want, and if it's something, shapes-wise or mathematical-wise, you can basically plot points and join them all up. And that's all you need to do to tell your tool. So it's the questions that what lead to ideas, to sort of improving your creativity. And the last thing I put is increasing fun. I did most of this stuff off the side of my desk and at weekends and just thinking, how can I become more creative? I've never been creative before. Data visualization allowed me to do it, but I needed help by just reaching out, asking questions, and wondering what else I could do that was a little bit different. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. Any questions?